Hello and welcome to the CLO Insider Series, an ETHRWorld leadership initiative in collaboration with Coursera. I'm your host, Hemanshi Tewari. Now, over the last few years, one conversation has consistently dominated boardrooms and learning teams alike: skills. Organizations are investing heavily in upskilling, reskilling, AI-enabled learning, and capability building initiatives. Yet one fundamental question continues to surface: how do we know learning is actually making a difference? Now, for decades, learning leaders have been asked to demonstrate ROI, but perhaps the conversation is evolving. Maybe the real value of learning isn't just about attendance, completion rates, or even training hours. Maybe it is about something far more consequential: competence. Can people perform better, adapt faster, and deliver greater business impact because of what they've learned? And if competence is becoming the new currency of workforce success, how should organizations identify it, build it, and measure it? To unpack these questions, I'm joined in by two leaders who bring complementary perspectives to this conversation. Joining us today is Prithwish Pathak, AVP and Head of Learning and Development at Alkem Labs, who has been closely involved in building workforce capabilities in a highly specialized and performance-driven industry. We're also joined in by Sameer Aggarwal, India Head Coursera for Business, who works with organizations across sectors and has a front row view of how learning and skills strategies are evolving globally. Well, thank you so much, Jinpin, for being a part of this discussion. It's really wonderful to have you both with us today. And Prithwish, I'll directly come to you, and Sameer, I'll come to you right after. What's interesting is at this point in time is that learning is perhaps one of those business investments that has always been expected to prove its value, right? But yet, we know that measuring that value has never been straightforward. Organizations are long looking to find the ROI out of learning, but linking it to performance, that part often remains unclear. So, Prithwish, what is the challenge? How we measure learning, or the assumption that it can be measured like other business investments as well?
Well, that's a very powerful question, which has been L&D experts has been trying to find an answer from many days. So if you see, typically the challenge is both. At one hand, if you see, there are people traditionally used to measure your training hours per employee, then your number of courses completion, and then people are trying to measure what is the marks scored. Okay, how much is the consumption of learning content. These are all very traditional way, but that doesn't never prove an ROI, because this usually is saying that okay, the learning is happening. Now, between an happening and an application, there's a huge gap. Okay. Now, at the same time, the business leader expect their definition of ROI is typically they mean a P&L. Okay, which again I see is not the right measurement. The right measurement would be the competence, the demonstrated behavior that is getting changed. Okay, which ultimately will culminate to your the P&L or whatever. Now, learning, if you see in isolation, it's typically not it's a business enabler. Okay, it's not a direct benefit transfer. For example, if I take my industry, if I am doing something which is a direct benefit transfer to a strategy or a customer, you can still correlate, okay, I have invested this much, and so am I able to get the revenue so much. Okay, but learning is more of an enabler where you cannot have a direct correlation to this. But yes, what you need to really measure is, for example, let me give an example. Suppose I am I'm training a supervisor at the plant. So if he has gone through a GMP certification, okay, and he has scored 100%, measure is not about that. The measure is my do I have better outcomes in terms of the audit that are happening? Are my audits more clear? Do I have minimal observation coming from auditors? Okay, is my quality of my products improving? Okay, end of the day, are my consumers who are consuming our medicines or our products, are they satisfied? These are some of the measures which are more important in terms of measuring really there's a the needle has moved towards the competence, or so that's the, I think, the right measurement that should happen. So the both traditional approach are, I don't see a reason. One is, the traditional learning out, the measurement of training hours and all, these are not very the right methods. Okay. At the same time, straight away going to a PNL is also not the right method. You have to somehow figure out what is that competence which is improving, which will finally give the revenue.
Yeah, that's the word we'll hold on to. But before that, Sameer, quick take on this as well.
Yeah, listen, those are some really good points. But if I have to kind of bring it all together, I feel like any investment, whether it's an L&D investment or anything else, needs to have some sort of an impact. So impact has to be there. But to Prithwish's point, that measurement doesn't necessarily have to be treated as a one-off cause and effect sort of a thing. I think it's more a chain. So of course, engagement is important. So there's consumption metrics, how many hours somebody is learning, so on and so forth. It starts from there, of course. We can't stop there. From consumption, it has to move to skills, from skills to competence, from competence to business outcomes, and therefore impact. So I think net of it is, yes, measurement is very important, but don't treat it like a one-off activity. Think of it more as a chain or a sequence of.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very interesting because now the conversation shifts from, learning activity to business capability. Right. So Prithwish, to your point, you talked about competence. When we talk about competence, it often sounds abstract, right? For business leaders, it becomes meaningful only when it is linked to performance or outcomes. So if you can think a role where capability directly impacts business outcomes, how have you defined the metrics for that? How have you defined competence for that? What shift you made, if you can just discuss that?
So to me, competence is very simple way to understand is basically an employee's, I would say, consistent ability to perform a certain task in a real business environment.
Yeah.
That's typically is a competence. Okay. Now, if I see a role wise, suppose if I see my sales employees who are on ground, on field, meeting customers, if I have to really measure the effectiveness of whatever we have done, there are some matrices which can directly we can measure. It's not always about, again I'm saying, it's not always about the final revenue. It's about, for example, I am suppose improving other capability on relationship development or rapport building. Now, how the metrics will be measured here is, how many of my customers have their cell numbers saved in their mobile with the name and the company, which means if today a particular sales employee had 20 such customers in where their own name and cell numbers were saved, has it moved up to 100? Has it moved up to 70? So that's the measurement I can understand. So many of customers have started finding a value in that person. Okay, meeting. So there's a typical metrics from where you can make out that, well, the learning that has happened that are actually translated into some kind of a better behavior. And finally, this is the metrics I'm seeing that the customer is finding a value in him. Okay, so these kind of metrics we see. Obviously, we do track the number of revenue generated by a customer. That's obviously the last outcome we definitely track. We can't avoid being a commercial house. We can't avoid that. But usually, these are the major lead indicators we try to see. Okay, and then obviously you have the on-job observation of managers and all. These are always there, but it's always difficult to capture at times because you are not there. So maybe you have to rely on their whatever interview you do and whatever feedback you give. If you go by a data set, I think these are the good data to understand. If I am developing a capability program for leaders, my very simple metrics is my build to buy ratio. Okay, how many in the organization positions are getting filled up through an internal talent getting moving, and how many I am actually buying from outside? If this ratio is positive, so I have more internal talent filling up my leadership position, and less I am buying from outside, which means definitely, and as an L&D, we are in the right path. We are taking those measures and the interventions in a way that is really ultimately giving me the right outcome.
Absolutely. That's a powerful distinction, moving from measuring participation to measuring proficiency at the end of the day. And Sameer, if you can come into the conversation from your vantage point, you have been looking at a lot of industries. You've been working with a lot of industries, a lot of organizations So you really do have a bird's eye view. What separates intent from execution? Where are you seeing a clear shift from, learning consumption to actual skill application? And what are those organizations doing really differently?
I mean, what these organizations are doing differently, I think, is a multi-million dollar question. And Prithwish kind of touched upon it. My view is that ultimately it's about mastering the build, buy, borrow sort of a setup. And what I'm seeing some best-in-class companies do here is have a very good understanding of what their job architecture today is and what it needs to look like.
Yeah.
It has to ultimately start from there.
Hmm.
From there, of course, you'll build your skills map. But to your point, just building a skills map does nothing.
Yeah.
It has to translate then into not just consumption, because consumption of knowledge, again, doesn't mean anything unless it's applied, right? So that measurement chain that I was talking about earlier kind of ties in very well with this sort of a sequence here, which is, let's understand the job architecture. Let's design our skills taxonomy. Let's create content to support those skills that we need to build. Let's find ways to measure competence that is coming now as a function of these skills being acquired, and how ultimately that's leading to internal mobility. And come to think of it, it ultimately answers the question of build, buy, borrow, and what the respective percentages.
Yeah. That's a very good point you've made. Many organizations, they do identify skill gaps. They do identify gaps. They know that there are certain gaps that they need to fill, but they perhaps struggle to translate it into performance at scale. And with this question, Prithwish, if I come to you, where does this break down the most? And what sort of helps to close this gap?
So if I see, there are three things that I'd like to mention specifically. The first point is the reinforcement or the coaching done by the managers post that intervention has happened. That's very, very critical piece. With my experience, I can tell 90% of the time the interventions fail and the participants won't apply just because it has not been reinforced or coached by their managers post the training. This is a very critical piece where I think the managers need to be equipped with whatever their people has undergone. Their managers need to be coached to become good coaches. Okay, these are some of the very critical pieces. Unless until this is happening, I can tell you is going to fail. It is one-time intervention which has happened. The other thing part of is what I also see is which is the second point is here. Are we really creating those programs? Is the content design has to do? Is it practical enough? Okay, there is another failure with that happens. Many a times the content becomes too theoretical and doesn't really correlate to the business outcome that is required. Okay. So there, that customization need to be made enough, and the design, the content design has to be such that it looks like very practical, can be implemented. Okay, so those, it's not about how many theory I have taught them. It's more about the practical examples that I have been able to share with them. It's more experiential. So one is the content design. The first part, as I said, about the managerial part or the piece. That's possibly the biggest piece. And third, and last but not the least, I would also like to mention here, are they getting opportunity to practice those skills? I'm just giving an example. Suppose I have trained a guy on AI, okay, and the courses has happened. Now, has the organization provided them the right licenses of those AI tools? Is he using a free version? So in free version, he has limited scope. If I am not giving him a full license of enterprise version where he can use freely a chat GPT or whatever the AI tools he is using, how he is going to practice it? He must get a scope to practice it. So I have take as simple as like an Excel training. Let's say example, I have trained him on a Power BI and a VLOOKUP, but in his practical scenario, he doesn't have a scope to demonstrate that. So ultimately the skill is going to diminish after some time. Okay, so that's the third piece. So Easy has the enough scope to practice the skills learned. The first is the manager that's the biggest piece, and the third one, as I said, was about the how the design of the content has happened. These are the three things I think that's very critical.
Those some very powerful points that you made, and this naturally brings me to the part of data as well. You spoke about data as well in your answer. So, organizations at this point in time, they are investing heavily on skill assessments and framework. Organizations do have visibility on the skills, but the question is that visibility actually leading to better decision making or not? So, Sameer, from your vantage point, what differentiates those organizations, who operationalize those skill data, then the organizations who perhaps just stop at mapping, like you talked about in one of your answers as well?
Yeah. Listen, you're absolutely right, because of course, like everything in life, there's a maturity curve here, and the starting point, of course, is to build that skills map. And you see some people build like a fancy dashboard around it.
Yeah.
Great, but what are you doing with it?
Yeah.
So ultimately, what I'm seeing happen, one is a lot of focus on verification of skills.
Yeah.
Because, just consuming content doesn't guarantee that you've actually acquired those skills and you're an expert in those skills. Prithwish spoke about the importance of application, right? So unless you've practiced on that skill, and unless you've proven that you have that skill, there is lesser weightage in the scheme of things. So that, I think, is one major shift, verification. And the other is this endeavor to link it to things like internal mobility and business outcomes, right? So project deployments, in the case of services companies or consulting firms, or role changes towards the kind of job architecture the company is hinging towards. That becomes another measure. Easier said than done, but a lot of companies are on that path.
All right. Thank you so much, Jinpin. But, before leaving, I would like to leave our audience with some forward-looking perspective as well. We have spent years tracking learning outcomes through completion rates, through tracking hours, like how many hours of learning they have done, through participation rate, through certifications. But of course, as the skills are evolving, as the requirement is evolving, the learning, the metrics are evolving as well, right? So, to both of you, if you can tell us that one learning impact measure, that one metric you believe will have an impact in the coming future, and that one metric that probably won't have any impact in the coming future. I'll start with you, Prithwish.
So, I'll just keep it very short here. It's more of, are we making our workforce ready for the future? Okay, that is one thing that needs to be measured. What is the technology adoption rate of my employees? How good are my leaders coaching? What is my talent bench readiness? Okay, to take up the leadership position. Okay, these are some of the things I think that, and what are the future skills which are going to come in future? How many of my employees are ready with that? I think these are some of the things which we need to focus. It's about the workforce readiness, and not about the whatever you said about consumption of learning hours and consumption of training. That's actually doesn't give you any idea of really that impact is happening or not. I think I would like to keep it like.
All right, very well said. What about you, Sameer?
I think Prithwish said it, but if I have to just say it in one word, I think that one word is competence. And I was attending a conference earlier today, and it said competence is a new currency, which makes a lot of sense. And I was joking that if competence is a new currency, then we're in the business of printing notes. But kidding aside, I think competence is important because it really is skills applied in a certain context, which kind of, to my mind, upholds the human agency as well. So we're talking the human plus AI sort of a thing, and competence becomes really, really important. And what's old-fashioned now definitely is consumption. There was a time when consumption created access and
Yeah.
that meant everything. But I think we've moved beyond
We
that.
have moved beyond. Of course, the times have changed, and the real differentiator perhaps is going to be how we change skills into capability and then capabilities into outcomes.
Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you so much, gentlemen, for being a part of this discussion. And what I take away from this conversation is that the future of learning may not be about proving activity, but about building competence that translates into measurable business performance. As organizations navigate rapid change, the real differentiator may very well be how quickly they can turn skills into capability and capability into outcomes. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the CLO Insider Series. We'll see you again soon with many more conversations shaping the future of work and learning.